Supreme Commander Vextra stood at the command center of the Xeraxian Empire's flagship, the Eternal Dawn, her iridescent scales reflecting the soft blue glow of the holographic displays surrounding her. The massive vessel, stretching nearly 5 kilometers in length, represented the pinnacle of Xeraxian military might. As the leader of the Empire's third expansion fleet, she had overseen the addition of 12 star systems to their territory in the past cycle alone. Supreme Commander, announced First Officer Krell, his auxiliary sensory tendrils twitching with mild agitation. We've detected an unknown fleet approaching the meridian boundary. Vextra's primary eyes narrowed while her secondary set continued monitoring the tactical displays. Classification: Unknown design architecture, Commander. Small vessels, barely larger than our scout ships. 11 in total. Krell's voice carried a note of dismissal. They appear to be primitive. The main view screen activated, showing a cluster of small ships moving in perfect formation. Their design was unlike anything in the Xeraxian database: sleek, dark vessels with smooth curves instead of the traditional crystalline structures favored by most spacefaring races. Origin: Vextra's scales shifted to a deeper blue, indicating curiosity. Based on their trajectory. Krell paused, checking his readings again. They appear to be from the Sol system. Humans. A wave of amusement rippled through the command center. The humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago. Their emergence had caused little interest among the established powers, particularly the Xeraxian Empire, which traced its spacefaring heritage back 20,000 years. Humans. Vextra's scales flickered with amusement. Show me their power signatures. The tactical display updated, showing energy readings that seemed almost laughably weak. The entire human fleet's power output barely matched that of the Eternal Dawn's auxiliary systems. They're either incredibly brave or monumentally foolish, remarked Strategic Officer Mira, her crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly as she moved closer to the display. Perhaps they don't realize they've reached our territory. Vextra considered the situation. Protocol demanded they issue a warning before any military response, but these vessels seemed so harmless that even that felt like overkill. Open a communication channel. Let's educate these newcomers about galactic politics. The main screen shifted, showing the interior of the lead human vessel. A single figure sat in what appeared to be a command chair, a human female with dark skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight arrangement. Her uniform was simple, almost austere compared to the ornate military garments of the Xeraxian officers. Unknown vessels, Vextra announced, her translator converting her harmonic speech into standard galactic English. You have entered Xeraxian space. Identify yourselves immediately. The human commander's expression remained neutral, almost serene. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Exploration Force vessel Curiosity. We are conducting a scientific survey of this sector, which according to the Galactic Concordat of 2218, remains neutral space. Vextra's scales rippled with barely contained laughter. A scientific survey, with 11 ships. Do you take us for fools, human? Your vessels are clearly military in design, despite their diminutive nature. Our vessels serve multiple purposes, Supreme Commander, Chen replied, her calm demeanor unchanged. We have no hostile intentions. We are merely exercising our right to explore neutral space. The bridge crew of the Eternal Dawn exchanged amused glances. The human's composure in the face of a vastly superior force was either admirable or delusional. Perhaps, Vextra said, her scales now showing patterns of warning, you fail to grasp your situation. The Eternal Dawn alone could reduce your entire fleet to atoms in less time than it takes to deliver this message. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw beyond the meridian boundary. After that, we will consider your presence an act of aggression. Captain Chen nodded once, her expression still frustratingly calm. We understand your position, Supreme Commander. However, we will continue our survey, as is our right under galactic law. We trust that the Xeraxian Empire respects these laws as much as we do." The transmission cut off before Vextra could respond, causing her scales to flush deep crimson with anger. The audacity. They're practically asking to be destroyed. "Supreme Commander," Mira interjected, her voice carrying a note of caution. "There's something odd about their ships. The power readings are consistent, but the mass calculations seem off somehow." "Explain." "Their vessels appear to be displacing more space than their size would suggest. It's subtle, but—" "Enough," Vextra cut her off. "They're clearly using outdated cloaking technology to try and confuse our sensors. Typical primitive attempts at deception." She turned to her tactical officer. "Prepare a display of force. I want 50 destroyers moved into position. Let's show these humans what real military power looks like." As the orders were carried out, none of the Xeraxian officers noticed the faint smile that had crossed Captain Chen's face just before she ended the transmission. They were about to learn that in space, appearances could be deceiving, and humanity had long since mastered the art of making their enemies underestimate them. The next hour passed with excruciating slowness aboard the Eternal Dawn. Supreme Commander Vextra watched as 50 Xeraxian destroyers took position around the human fleet, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the starlight. Each destroyer was a masterpiece of Xeraxian engineering, their angular designs proven through countless conflicts across 2 millennia. "Display matrix complete, Supreme Commander," announced Tactical Officers X. "The humans are now surrounded on all vectors." Vextra's scales shifted to a satisfied green as she observed the tactical display. The human vessels looked absurdly small, like prey animals surrounded by apex predators. Yet they maintained their perfect formation, showing no signs of concern. Still no change in their power signatures. First Officer Krull reported, his auxiliary tendrils twitching with growing unease. "They haven't even raised shields." "Supreme Commander," Strategic Officer Mira's crystalline form chimed softly as she approached. "I've completed a deeper analysis of the sensor data. There are anomalies." Vextra turned all 4 eyes toward her senior analyst. "Explain." "The space around their vessels appears to be folding, for lack of a better term. It's subtle, but the effect is increasing. Look here." Mira manipulated the tactical display, zooming in on the space between the human ships. Tiny distortions rippled through the void, like heat waves over desert sand. Some form of primitive stealth technology, Vextra suggested, though her scales had begun to show traces of uncertainty. "No known stealth system creates these patterns," Mira responded. "And there's more. Their hull composition. Its reading is standard titanium alloy, but the molecular structure is wrong. It's as if—" She was interrupted by an urgent alert from the sensor station. "Supreme Commander, energy spike detected." The tactical display erupted with new data as strange readings emanated from the human fleet. The space around their vessels seemed to shimmer, like light through water. "Get me Captain Chen," Vextra ordered, her scales now showing patterns of concern. The human commander appeared on screen, still wearing that maddeningly calm expression. "Yes, Supreme Commander." "Explain these energy readings immediately," Vextra demanded. "What are you doing?" "We're simply maintaining our position," Chen replied. "Though I should mention that your sensor arrays might experience some interference, a natural consequence of our hull design." As if on cue, the tactical display flickered. For a brief moment, the human ships seemed to blur, their edges becoming indistinct before snapping back into focus. "Impossible," muttered Krull, working frantically at his station. Their mass readings just shifted, as if they momentarily existed in 2 places at once. "A trick," Vextra declared, though her scales had shifted to a defensive gray. "Some form of sensor confusion technology. Launch probe drones. I want visual confirmation of their exact position and size." 20 probe drones detached from the Eternal Dawn, their crystalline forms gliding toward the human fleet. As they approached, something extraordinary happened. 3 of the drones simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. They ceased to exist. Supreme Commander, Mira's voice had taken on an edge of awe. The space around their vessels. It's not just folding anymore. It's transforming. These readings suggest they're generating some form of localized spatial distortion. Captain Chen's image still filled the main screen. Supreme Commander, I feel I should warn you. Probe drones don't react well to phase-shifted space. They tend to slip between the dimensions. Phase-shifted. Vextra's scales paled. That's theoretical technology. No species has successfully stabilized dimensional phase shifting. Actually, Chen smiled slightly. We prefer the term quantum displacement field. Much more accurate. You see, humanity learned long ago that the best way to advance wasn't to build bigger ships, but to fundamentally change how our ships interact with space itself. The remaining probe drones began reporting back visual data, but the images made no sense. The human ships seemed to flicker between different sizes, their forms becoming fluid, impossible to pin down. Your fleet, Chen continued, is currently witnessing only about 15% of our actual vessels. The rest exists slightly out of phase with normal space. A defensive measure, you understand. We find it helps prevent misunderstandings. Vextra's tactical training warred with her disbelief. If the humans had truly mastered phase shift technology, then their small fleet could potentially contain more firepower than her entire battle group. More importantly, conventional weapons would be useless against ships that could simply shift out of normal space. Strategic assessment, she barked, trying to maintain her composure. Mira's response was immediate and troubling. If their technology is as advanced as these readings suggest, Supreme Commander, we have no effective countermeasures. Our weapons would quite literally pass through them. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The supposedly primitive human fleet had just revealed technology that rendered 20,000 years of Zeraxian military advancement potentially obsolete. Captain Chen's voice broke the silence. Now then, Supreme Commander, shall we discuss the proper protocols for scientific surveys in neutral space? I assure you, we have some fascinating discoveries we'd be willing to share. The scales along Vextra's neck rippled with a new emotion. Respect tinged with fear. She was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their ability to appear harmless until the perfect moment. Supreme Commander Vextra stood in the diplomatic chamber of the Eternal Dawn, her scales now a measured blend of caution and curiosity. Captain Chen had accepted an invitation to meet in person, a gesture that somehow made Vextra even more uneasy. The human commander stepped through the airlock alone, without an escort, her simple uniform a stark contrast to the ornate chamber. Your technology, Vextra began, dispensing with formal greetings. It should not be possible. Chen smiled, running a hand along one of the crystalline walls. Humanity has always had a unique approach to impossibility, Commander. We tend to view it as a temporary inconvenience. The ship's sensors were still struggling to get a clear reading on the human fleet. Every scan revealed new impossibilities. Ships that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, energy signatures that appeared and vanished like quantum ghosts. How? The question escaped Vextra's primary voice box before she could stop it. Her secondary voice added, Our scientists theorize that phase shift technology would require energy levels capable of destabilizing an entire star system. That was our first approach too, Chen admitted, settling into one of the offered seats, until a researcher named Dr. Maya Patel had what we call an elegant solution. Instead of brute forcing our way through dimensional barriers, we learned to persuade them. Mira, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, looked up. Persuade space itself. Think of it this way. Chen gestured to the air around them. Your ships try to dominate space, to bend it to your will through sheer power. Our ships dance with it. We create harmonics at the quantum level that allow our vessels to exist partially in multiple dimensional states. It actually requires very little energy once you understand the underlying principles. A soft alert chimed through the chamber. First Officer Crowell's voice followed. Supreme Commander, we're detecting new energy signatures from the human fleet. The main display activated, showing the space around the human vessels beginning to ripple like silk in a breeze. Small portions of their hulls seemed to fade in and out of visibility, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath their seemingly simple exterior. Ah, Chen nodded. The quantum harmonics are shifting. Would you like to see what our ships really look like? Before Vextra could respond, the image on the display transformed. The small, unassuming human vessels began to unfold. It was as if layers of reality were peeling back, revealing what had been hidden in the spaces between spaces. Where there had been simple hulls, now complex geometric patterns emerged, flowing and shifting like living mathematics. By the First Empire, Mira whispered, her crystalline form resonating with shock. They're not ships at all. What are they? We call them quantum manifold vessels, Chen explained. Each ship exists simultaneously in multiple dimensional states, allowing us to manifest different aspects as needed. What you're seeing now is their research configuration. The display showed structures that defied conventional physics, geometries that shouldn't have been possible in normal space. Arrays of sensors and research equipment emerged from quantum pockets, transforming the seemingly small vessels into sprawling scientific complexes. This is how we conduct our surveys, Chen continued. Each ship carries enough scientific equipment to study an entire star system, all tucked away in quantum space until needed, much more efficient than building massive vessels. Vextra's scales had shifted to a deep blue of fascination, and their combat configuration. Chen's expression grew serious. Let's hope we don't need to demonstrate that. Suffice to say, humanity learned long ago that the most effective weapons aren't the ones you can see. Your species, Mira interjected, her scientific curiosity overwhelming protocol. How did you advance so quickly? Most races take thousands of years to progress from chemical rockets to basic spaceflight. You achieved this in less than 3 centuries. Necessity, Chen replied simply. Earth's resources were limited, our population growing. We couldn't afford to build massive fleets or focus on conventional expansion. We had to think differently. She gestured to the display, where the human ships continued their impossible dance with reality. This technology wasn't born from a desire for power, but from the need to do more with less. A new alert sounded, more urgent this time. Supreme Commander, Krell's voice carried a note of alarm. The quantum distortions are spreading. They're affecting our sensors across the entire sector. A side effect, Chen explained calmly. Once initiated, quantum harmonics tend to influence nearby spacetime. Don't worry. The effect is temporary. Though I should mention that any aggressive moves by your fleet right now would be unwise. Quantum fields can be rather unpredictable when they interact with weapons fire. Vextra found herself facing a decision that would define her career. The humans had revealed technology that could revolutionize, or devastate, the entire galaxy. Their small fleet, dismissed as primitive hours ago, now represented a power that her people barely understood. Perhaps, she said carefully, her scales shifting to diplomatic green, we should discuss that scientific cooperation you mentioned earlier. Chen's smile returned. I thought you'd never ask. Shall we begin with the basics of quantum harmonic theory? I think you'll find it quite fascinating. As the human captain began her explanation, Vextra realized that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted dramatically, not through force or conquest, but through humanity's unique ability to reimagine the possible. The news of humanity's quantum technology spread through the Ziraxian command structure like a shockwave. Within hours, the Eternal Dawn's diplomatic chamber had become a hub of frantic communication. High command representatives, appearing via quantum-encrypted channels, demanded explanations and assurances. This is unacceptable. Admiral Sarkon's holographic form towered over the chamber, his scales flickering between rage red and fear white. A primitive species cannot be allowed to possess such technology. The balance of power has already changed. Vextre interrupted, her scales showing determined calm. Admiral, I've seen their capabilities firsthand. The humans aren't just ahead of us. They're playing an entirely different game. On the main display, the human fleet continued its mesmerizing dance with reality. Their ships now appeared to exist in a state of constant transformation, parts of their structure flowing between dimensions like water through a complex network of channels. Supreme Commander, Captain Chen's voice came through the comm system. We're detecting additional Ziraxian warships entering the sector. Rather, a lot of them, actually. Vextra's secondary eyes widened as tactical data flooded her screens. The 2nd and 4th battle fleets were converging on their position. Over 300 capital ships, led by the dreadnought Invincible Will. Admiral, Vextra's scales shifted to warning patterns. Whatever you're planning, the High Command has made its decision, Exarchon declared. If the humans won't surrender their technology willingly, we will take it. Their ships may be advanced, but they cannot stand against the combined might of 3 battle fleets. The human vessels showed no reaction to the approaching armada. They maintained their formation, their quantum fields rippling peacefully through space. Captain Chen, Exarchon's hologram addressed the human directly. You have 1 standard hour to power down your vessels and prepare for boarding. Resist, and we will be forced to take more decisive action. There was a moment of silence before Chen responded, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been pity. Admiral, I really wouldn't recommend that. Quantum harmonics can be rather sensitive to hostile intentions. You dare threaten. Not a threat, Admiral. A physics lesson. Chen's tone remained professional. You see, our quantum displacement fields don't just affect our ships. They influence the very fabric of space-time around us. Any aggressive action would disrupt the careful balance we maintain. The results would be unpredictable. As if to emphasize her point, the space around the human fleet began to shift. The quantum ripples spread outward, creating patterns that seemed to fold back on themselves in impossible ways. Detecting massive spatial distortions, Mira reported, her crystalline form vibrating with anxiety. The quantum fields are expanding. On the tactical display, the effects became visible. The space between the human ships and the approaching Ziraxian fleet began to warp. Light bent in strange ways, creating corridors and pockets of altered reality. Last warning, Admiral, Chen announced. Order your ships to stand down, or we'll be forced to demonstrate why attempting to fire weapons through quantum-shifted space is a very bad idea. Exarchon's scales flushed deep crimson. Open fire. All ships target the human vessels. Admiral, no. Vextre shouted, but it was too late. The Ziraxian fleet launched its attack. Hundreds of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward the human ships. But as they entered the quantum-distorted space, something extraordinary happened. The weapons' fire began to curve and twist, following the contours of the warped space-time. Some shots seemed to loop back on themselves, while others vanished into pocket dimensions, only to reappear heading in completely different directions. The result was chaos. Weapons meant for the human fleet instead struck Ziraxian ships. The Invincible Will took 3 direct hits from its own weaponry. Other vessels found their shots emerging from impossible angles, causing damage throughout the fleet. Not a single human ship was touched. Fascinating effect, isn't it? Chen commented, as if discussing an interesting scientific phenomenon. We call it quantum reflective geometry. Quite useful for defensive purposes, though it does make the aggressor look rather foolish. The Ziraxian fleet was in disarray. Ships tried to retreat, but the quantum distortions made navigation treacherous. Some vessels found themselves temporarily existing in multiple locations at once, their crews experiencing the unsettling sensation of being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Stand down, Vextre ordered, her voice carrying the full authority of her position. All ships, cease fire immediately. The attack ended as quickly as it had begun. The quantum distortions began to stabilize, though several Ziraxian ships would need significant repairs from their self-inflicted damage. Admiral Exarchon's hologram had gone pale, his scales showing patterns of shock and disbelief. How? This isn't possible. Admiral, Chen said gently, perhaps now would be a good time to discuss peaceful scientific cooperation. We have so much we could learn from each other, assuming, of course, that everyone behaves civilly. Vextra watched as the mighty Ziraxian fleet hung motionless in space, humbled not by superior firepower, but by humanity's mastery of the fundamental forces of reality itself. 3 days after the failed attack, the Eternal Dawn's primary conference chamber hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from both species sat around a crystalline table, while holographic displays showed the ongoing transformation of space outside. Supreme Commander Vextra, her scales now a thoughtful shade of blue-green, watched as Captain Chen used simple hand gestures to manipulate a quantum simulation floating above the table's center. The demonstration showed how human ships could effectively slide between dimensional states, treating space-time less as a barrier and more as a medium to be shaped. The key breakthrough, Chen explained, came when we stopped trying to overcome universal constants and started working with them instead. Think of it as learning to swim rather than trying to build a bigger boat. Admiral Exarchon, now present in person rather than hologram, leaned forward. His scales had taken on the humble purple of a chastened warrior. Your ships don't just move through space. They become part of it. Exactly, Chen smiled. Traditional space travel is like trying to push through a wall. Our approach is more like becoming the wall itself, then deciding which side we'd like to be on. The chamber's displays showed the human fleet, now fully unveiled in all its quantum glory. What had appeared to be 11 small vessels had revealed themselves to be a complex network of interconnected research stations, their true forms existing across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The applications extend far beyond military use, continued Dr. Maya Patel, the architect of human quantum drive technology, who had arrived the previous day. Imagine research stations that could expand into entire scientific complexes when needed, then fold back into compact forms for travel, or medical facilities that could exist partially in multiple dimensions, allowing for treatment of conditions we once thought impossible to cure. Vextra noticed how the Ziraxian scientists present were literally vibrating with excitement, their crystalline forms resonating with the possibilities. One of them, Dr. Kex, spoke up, but the energy requirements are minimal, Dr. Patil interjected. Once you understand that you're not fighting against reality, but harmonizing with it. Your crystalline technology, for instance, would be particularly well suited for quantum adaptation. The natural lattice structures could serve as perfect quantum resonance chambers. The implications weren't lost on anyone present. The Ziraxians' greatest technological achievement, their living crystal ships, could potentially become the foundation for an entirely new era of space exploration. We propose a joint research initiative, Chen announced. Your expertise in crystalline technology, combined with our understanding of quantum mechanics, could benefit both our species and others eventually. Admiral Exarchon's scales shifted to a complex pattern indicating deep thought. The High Command has reconsidered its position on technological sharing. Recent events have made it clear that the old paradigms of power need revision. Some might see this as surrender, Vextra observed carefully. No, Chen corrected. This is evolution. Humanity learned long ago that true advancement doesn't come from domination, but from adaptation and cooperation. We developed quantum technology not because we wanted to be powerful, but because we needed to be clever. Dr. Patil manipulated the holographic display, showing how human and Ziraxian technologies could theoretically merge. Your crystalline ships could become quantum resonance vessels, capable of things neither of our species could achieve alone. Imagine exploration ships that could phase through spatial anomalies, research stations that could study phenomena from multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously. The excitement in the room was palpable. Scientists from both species were already forming small groups, discussing possibilities, sharing ideas. The military personnel, including Sarkhan, watched with a mixture of awe and relief as centuries of competition gave way to cooperation. There will be those who resist, Sarkhan warned. Change is never easy, especially for an empire as old as ours. Of course, Chen agreed. But consider this. 3 days ago, you saw 11 small ships as a potential threat to be eliminated. Now you see them as gateways to possibilities you never imagined. That's how evolution works, not through force, but through understanding. Vextra stood, her scales displaying the formal patterns of official declaration. As Supreme Commander of the 3rd Expansion Fleet, I hereby propose a new designation for this sector of space. No longer a border to be defended, but a joint development zone for the advancement of both our species. The proposal was met with unanimous approval. As the meeting concluded, Vextra approached Chen privately. You could have destroyed us, she observed. When we attacked, the quantum distortions could have been weaponized. We could have, Chen acknowledged. But humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our ability to imagine better possibilities. We didn't come here to conquer or dominate. We came to explore, to learn, and to grow. And now, perhaps, to teach as well. Outside, the human fleet continued its ethereal dance with reality, while Zeraxian ships cautiously approached to begin the first joint research projects. In the space between dimensions, the future was already taking shape, built not on the old foundations of power and fear, but on the new understanding that the greatest adventures come not from conquering the impossible, but from transforming it into the achievable.